好，今天我们很荣幸能够邀请到这个富尔布莱特学术交流基金会台湾的地区的执行长 Dr. Vocke 莅临我们本校呢，来为我们发表一场精彩的演讲。那么很希望今天这样的一个精彩的演讲之后，我们能够有对于那个富尔布莱特基金会它的这个机构以及将来可以为我们的师生提供什么样的一个国际交流的机会呢，有更深层的了解。那首先呢，我要先邀请张校长呢来赠送 Dr. Vocke 本校的纪念品。
Ladies and gentlemen, it is our greatest pleasure to have Dr. Vocke and to come to National Open University. And Dr. Vocke is from the Fulbright, Taiwan, and he is now the executive director of the Fulbright, Taiwan. And now I would like to invite our president, Ji Hao Zhang, to give you a present and from our university. So, Ji Hao Zhang.
Let me first, before I start, give you a little background on myself. I'm a specialist in international politics. I have taught in America. My last place to teach in America was the University of Wisconsin in Milwaukee. I also was with the Carnegie Council for Ethics in International Affairs in New York City. But I have been in Taiwan 2 years, running the Fulbright Foundation. And I'm here because I met and fell in love with and married a wonderful woman who is with Wai Jiaobu. So 我的太太是Wai Jiaobu. I want to thank the university for this wonderful opportunity to speak. Mr. President, I appreciate you actually taking time from a very busy schedule to be here. And I hope you like this topic because it's something I've been involved in for 40 years. I was a number 2 academic officer at an American college, American university, and started my career doing international educational exchange, along with teaching. I ran World Affairs Councils in America, which teach Americans in major cities about international affairs. And I was president of the World Affairs Councils of America, and our job was to educate and involve Americans in world affairs. And since I've been in Taiwan, I have been involved with the Fulbright Foundation, talking about international education. So international education is something very close to my heart. I believe very much that it changes your life, that international education makes a fundamental difference in the way you look at the world. How many of you here in the room, and I know we have a lot of people watching on TV, but how many of you here in the room have lived overseas? Lived overseas. Who has lived overseas? 3 or 4. Okay? If you have lived overseas for a year, 6 months, you have had to learn to think differently. And that's an important change in how people look at the world. So let me talk a little bit more about international education. This is what I'm going to talk about today, about international education, some of its challenges, how important it is. I'm going to talk about my organization, Fulbright Taiwan. I'm going to talk about demands and opportunities, and then some recommendations. So let me begin. International education is a concept, an idea that remains fairly weak. It's something we seem to understand, but is weak in terms of its intellectual roots. I'm a political scientist. I'd study international politics. Political science is about power and distribution of power and governance. Economics is about wealth, the creation of wealth, the distribution of production. It's about how we create and move products around the world. Sociology is about institutions and society. Psychology is about individuals. History is about the past. All of these have strong content bases. They are deeply rooted in questions about content. But international education does not have a content base to it. It is a process. International education is a way that we do things, not something we do. Fundamental difference. And that's one of the reasons that it is weak. There is little consensus in academia about the meaning of international education. It's not prominent in American schools. Not many, in America or in Taiwan, not many schools have departments of international education. International education is found in education departments, or it's found in international education offices where you work with international students. Sometimes it's found in area studies, programs, Asian studies, European studies. But there are very few departments of international or cross-cultural education. It's weak because there is weak research and regional imbalance. Regional imbalance means that international education in America, when I was a young man deciding to go to university, if you wanted to do something international, you had to go to the East Coast or the West Coast. I grew up in Ohio. I'm a farm boy. There's corn here behind my ears. My family still has a farm in Ohio. We grow corn and soybeans, right? And I was interested in international, and you had to go to New York and Washington and Philadelphia and Los Angeles and San Francisco to be international, right? That's not true today, but then that was true. That still is true, though, in terms of regional imbalance. International is often thought of something that's done in the metropolitan area. It's done in Taipei, not Taitung. Okay, so those are reasons why it's weak. Another reason why international education is weak is that sometimes international education is a mindset. It's a way of thinking about the world, not a content basis. It's a way of thinking about the world that suggests that we need people simply to join each other together. That what we need is love. You know, there's an old American song, all you need is love, da, 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 the Beatles, right? All you need is love. Or perhaps it's about peace. You know, international education is about us knowing and liking and enjoying each other more. But of course, you know that sometimes if you get to know someone very well, you decide you don't like them, right? The more I know you, the less I like you, right? So it can't be just about everybody getting to know each other, everybody exchanging cultures and getting to know cultures. There are some cultures you may not like. I'm not very fond of the American part of the American culture that is very commercial. I don't like that commercialism. I don't like that everything is always a new star, a new pop thing. Everything is always sold on the basis of sex. I don't like that. So if you get to know a culture more, you may not learn to like that culture. So the important point to know here is that although in part it's a mindset, in part there is a belief that we need to get to know each other better. As an American and as a Taiwanese, I need to get to know you better. You need to get to know Americans better. That's true, but that's not all it is. In part, it's a mindset, and that mindset is suggested in these definitions. This is a definition of international education that comes from the Planning and Curriculum Guide of the University of Wisconsin, Department of Public Instruction. In other words, this is the guide that the state of Wisconsin gives to its public schools to say what should international education be in the public schools. And this definition suggests lots of things: lives and context, immersion, interactions and connections, awareness, complexity, all disciplines, all grade levels, entire school curriculum. But notice there's no content. There's no power, wealth, the individual psychology, the past. There's no content. It's all about how we do things. Okay? Here's another definition. This definition comes from the International Baccalaureate Program. This International Baccalaureate Program is really quite interesting. I don't believe, I'm not sure, but I don't believe there are any International Baccalaureate institutions in Taiwan, although the Taipei American School may be. I'm not sure of that. Okay? But the International Baccalaureate Program was a program that was set up for high schools, right, for grades 9 through 12 around the world, because you had Americans and Germans and Japanese bringing their children to a country where they would work and wanting a school for that children and needing a school that would educate people in a way that would make it possible for them to go home. Right? So I'm an American, I go to Germany, I need a school where I can put my children in school, and when they go back to America, they have to be able to re-enter the American schools, the American high schools. So the International Baccalaureate Program was set up to do that. And part of their curriculum, of course, has to be international education. So this is what they talk about. They talk about developing citizens of the world, building a sense of identity, fostering human values, universal human values, stimulating curiosity and inquiry, equipping students to learn and acquire knowledge. Again, those are all process kind of things. They are not content kinds of things, right? So again, it's a little bit fuzzy. It doesn't say, well, political science deals with authority, with power, with influence. But we don't have content here. Oops. So, one part of international education is about process. A second part of international education is about skills. And that's the way I define international education: process and skills. Mindset, how we go about interacting with the world, and skills. Here's a set of skills. These are for business for the 21st century. They come from the National Alliance for Business. Okay? These skills suggest in the 21st century people are going to need to be digitally literate. They're going to have to know computers, know computer programming. They're going to have to be inventive and creative. That's a big issue, a big topic in Taiwan today. Innovation and creativity, an innovation economy, an economy that's not based just on production, but based upon a higher level set of skills. It's what you're doing at Open University. You're trying to teach that higher level set of skills that get people past a basic level economy and on to a higher level economy. Interactive communication, learning to be effective in teams, and results-oriented. So this National Alliance for Business suggests that these are 4 skill sets that are slightly different and crucial for the 21st century. Interactive communication, for instance, is very different than business used to be thought about. Business used to be thought about as individuals going out and through their energy and innovation and creativity, perhaps through their luck, creating a business. Now we talk about business in terms of teams of people being able to interact effectively. Very different. So, international education is a mindset and skills. This is the way I like to define that set of skills: communication skills, intellectual contextual skills, and personal skills. In other words, 3 sets of skills that you will need in addition to a willingness to think internationally, in addition to a process, a mindset. It's not just enough to want to hug everybody. It's not just enough to want to love everybody. It's not just enough to want to understand another culture. You also need skills. And international education is about those skills. Communications, intellectual, contextual, and personal. 2 important points. The way you build those skills in an international education way is in a comparative way. In a comparative way. That's a really important point to make. And a comparative way means you talk about them cross-culturally. You talk about communications in Taiwan versus communications in America. Let me tell you a little story here. I taught in Germany for a year at a German university. Sprechen Sie Deutsch? My German is much better than my Chinese, but I apologize. But I taught in a German university for a year. This was back at a time when there was a lot of controversy between Americans and Germans about political issues, particularly about military issues. And I taught political science. In fact, I taught American foreign policy. So you can imagine that it was kind of a difficult time to be teaching American foreign policy in a German university. Okay? And when I got there and started teaching, I found that I was having lots of discussions with my students. These were very good students, master's degree, PhD students, very good students, and every discussion I was having, I was losing. You know, I was losing the I'm supposed to, I have a PhD, I've written a book, I'm supposed to know this stuff. And yet we would have these discussions and I would lose them. Right? And at the end I would have to say, well, I don't agree with you, but okay. Very embarrassing, right? It took me about 3 months, to figure out why I was losing the discussions. And it's because of our rhetorical style, our argumentative style, how we make arguments. The standard American argument style is to say, this is what I agree, this is what I think. I think A, B, C, D, E, F, blah, 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 blah. And then you say, this is what I think. A, B, C, and then my turn, I say, well, okay, I can agree with G and maybe B, but the rest is wrong, and this is why, right? That's American, it's a horse trading style of argument. I'll give you a little bit, you give me a little bit. And the reason for that is deeply cultural. Some of it has to do with America being a nation where people came from all over the world. Some of it has to do with a frontier where people had guns. So you don't want to say, you're wrong, you know. Right? Some of it has to do with trying to interact across long distances. You know, you want to maintain a relationship, so you give a little, you concede a little bit in the argument, right? That's a standard American argument style. German argumentation style is, I believe A, B, C, D. You believe A, B, C, D. A, B, C, D are wrong. My A, B, C, D are right. They don't concede. They say, no, no, this is why I'm right. They're kind of taught that from elementary school. So this, I have to show you with my hands now. This is what would happen in an argument. I would say this. They would say this. I would say, okay, and they would say this. And I would say, okay, and they would say this. And I would say, okay, and they would say this. So pretty soon it's this. Standard argumentation style, which had nothing to do with the substance of our argument. It had everything to do with the rhetoric, with the way we made an argument. It took me 3 months to learn that, to figure that out. After 3 months, I started saying this, and they said this, and I said, no, this, and they said this, and I said, no, this, and they said, well, okay. All right? So you have to learn cross-cultural communications, right, as part, and it has to be comparative, as part of that learning process. You don't learn that by just learning to argue about politics in America. You don't learn that style difference by just talking about American politics with Americans. You need to do it comparatively. The second thing is it needs to be interdisciplinary. One of the wonderful things about the 21st century is we have gotten more and more and more and more knowledge, more and more information. We know lots about effective communications. I know that I should look at each of you. At some point during this lecture, I should try to make eye contact with you. We've learned that. You know, communications professors know that, right? And as we've gotten more and more knowledge, the research that professors, researchers, academics do gets narrower and narrower and narrower, right? So 100 years ago, if you were writing a history PhD dissertation in America on Abraham Lincoln, one of our great, great presidents, you were writing a history PhD dissertation on Abraham Lincoln 100 years ago, you had a lot of things you could write about. Today, if you were writing a PhD dissertation on Abraham Lincoln, everything's been written. There are hundreds of books on Abraham Lincoln. Lots and lots of research on Abraham Lincoln. You would probably have to talk about something like, did the shoes he wear affect his capacity as a president? That's making that up, that's a joke. But you would probably have to do something very, very narrow to do something new. Of course, it's true in science, right? Science is that way. Science gets very narrow, finds out something, and then other people add on. That's the way academia tends to work. That's the way all of the professors are encouraged to write. They write on a narrow area for a specialized journal, and that's how they do their work. But that's not international education. International education is interdisciplinary. You don't go to Germany and talk about political science and not try to learn something about German history and German culture and German language, German sociology, German economics. You need to know those things to be effective. I need to know things about Taiwan to be effective in Taiwan. So you have to, in international education, break out of the standard academic mode, which encourages all of us, including me, to focus narrowly. You have to think about width, breadth, not just depth. Okay, so international education needs to be comparative and it needs to be interdisciplinary. Can you see now why international education has a difficult time finding a place at the university? Because it goes against the general thrust of the university. It says be interdisciplinary, and our disciplines force us to be narrow. It says be comparative, and unless you're in comparative literature, comparative economics, you don't do comparative work. You do work about Taiwan or China or America. Okay? So international education is kind of counter to the thrust of the university, particularly if we talk about international education across the curriculum. International education is not just, I'm going to send you to America for a semester. That's one part of international education. Study abroad is one part of international education, right? But international education is many, many, many more things than just studying abroad for a year, living abroad for a year. Okay. When I talk then about communication skills, I mean these four types: interpersonal communication, languages, listening, and team building. Four key communication skills that are part of international education. These are pretty clear. This is very important, and I want to thank all of you today. I don't know about the people watching on camera, but no one here in the room is looking at their cell phone. Sheshe. Thank you. Thank you for not looking at your cell phone. I appreciate that. I worry about this generation of students because they spend lots of time doing this instead of communicating. I had a colleague when I was at the Carnegie Council for Ethics in International Affairs in New York City. I had a colleague, and I'm sure you have one as well, who when he talked to you like this. Hi, how you doing? Things going okay? Yeah, things are just fine. How? Oh, yeah, okay. Things are okay. Yeah, okay. Yeah, it's all right. Yeah, okay. No. Didn't matter what you were talking about. Something serious, very important. He always had his cell phone out, and he couldn't keep his eye off his cell phone. And we would be talking and he would do this and then I would just stop talking. I'd just stop until he went, oh, okay, I'm sorry. And he put it away, and 5 minutes later, his cell phone was back out. You know? And there he was, looking at his cell phone. I mean, you know, for my generation, that's rude. For my generation, that's inappropriate behavior. For his generation, you know, he was a young guy. For his generation, it's almost as if this is part of your body. It's kind of physically attached to your hand, right? I worry about that in terms of this generation because interpersonal communications are not this. It's not texting people. It's trying to keep you awake. It's looking at you and seeing if you're paying attention. It's interpersonal between people. Let's talk about language for a minute. Language. One question I'm sometimes asked is, well, what's the best language to study? You know, everybody thinks you should study a foreign language, right? What's the best language to study? This, I think, is the best answer. The best answer is the foreign language you should know is the language of the country that you're in. I should know Chinese. You know, just because I can speak German, that doesn't do me much good here. I need to learn Chinese. By the way, I'm trying very hard. It's a very difficult language for an old guy. You know, my mind just doesn't seem to get the me, ma. You know, I don't understand. I can't hear the tones. Maybe because I don't sing well, but I can't hear the tones. But languages are something you need to do because language and culture are attached. Language and culture are closely related to each other. So language is crucial. The language of the country you're in is crucial. But what if you're studying language in your own country? What language do you study? I have a simple answer for you. You study the most useful languages in the world, and they are English, Chinese, and maybe Spanish, depending on where you're going to go. If you know English and Chinese, you can do business anywhere in the world. Anywhere in the world. Okay. Certainly in the most important markets in the world. Look at me. I'm standing in Taiwan in a classroom with, I believe, all Taiwanese, speaking to people who are probably Taiwanese, and I'm speaking in English. So, if you need to learn a foreign language, and you do need to learn a foreign language, English, Chinese, maybe Spanish. Actually, my first language was German, and my second was French, and they're not doing me very much good now. But they did help me understand Germany and France. They did help me understand other cultures. These are pretty straightforward. Listening and team building. Listening is an important skill. I hope you're working with that with your students with listening skills because they, again, are spending their time looking at their phones. Let's talk about then the second set of skills I talked about. I talked about contextual skills. Now I'm talking about intellectual and contextual skills. I have a question for you. These two maps. You have to vote now. I know you don't like to do this. I know people don't like to choose. Okay, but I want you to choose. I want you to tell me which of these two maps you like best. Which of these two maps you like best? How many people like this map best? Please raise your hand. Raise your hand. How many like this map best? 4. How many like this map best? Oh, come on, I said you had to vote. Come on. Most of the rest of you, maybe 15 or 20. Contextual skills. I know I didn't give you time to look at the map. I know there wasn't enough focus on the map. But this map says that Taiwan is part of China, right? They're the same color. The fonts are the same for the things, the same size. That map says Taiwan is part of China. This map says slightly different color. If you could see the fonts, you would see the fonts on the printing are slightly different, and the size is slightly different. This map says Taiwan's different. That's contextual knowledge. You know that. You understand that. But if I was using that map in America and used this map to teach about Taiwan, I would be teaching the wrong thing. Right? Unless, of course, you think that China is part of Taiwan because of the Republic of China, right? So Taiwan is the Republic of China, and China is part of Taiwan. Those are political issues, right? Those are political issues. China, Taiwan, etc. But it's hugely controversial. And these two maps have different perspectives on that controversy. And that's the point. You have to understand the intellectual and historical, contextual context. Those are skills. They are geography, politics, history, culture, religion, art. All of those things provide information about skills. Let me make another argument this way. If you're going to be a doctor, if you're going into medicine, and you're successful, in 10 or 15 years you'll be running a clinic or maybe a hospital, but you'll be in a position of some authority. And one of the things you will have to do, this applies, by the way, for anybody, any business, it's not just medicine, but I use science here because sometimes scientists don't think this is true. Any place you are going to be an authority, you're going to have to sell something, you're going to have to get funds, you're going to have to receive donations. You are going to be selling in some way, selling your clinic, getting people to donate to your clinic, talking about NGOs working with your clinic. The probability that those people are going to be interested in your medical specialty, maybe your specialty is cancer research, they're going to be interested in how's it going? Are you finding a cure? Yes or no? But they're not going to want to know the details of your research. What those people are going to want to talk about are other things. They might want to talk about art. They might want to talk about music. They might want to talk about history. They might be ardently in favor of Taiwan independence. That's important for you to know if you want to get them to donate to you. Or alternatively, they might believe in unification with China. That's important to know if you want them to donate to you. These kinds of skills are skills that everybody needs regardless of how narrow their study. Contextual skills, intellectual skills. Finally, personal skills, curiosity, planning, flexibility, toughness, discipline, compassion, humility. These kinds of intellectual personal skills are skills that you develop in particular ways. And I'm now going to make the argument that this is where study abroad comes in. This is where living overseas has an impact. That living overseas helps develop these skills. For those of you that have lived overseas for a year, you know that there is a certain toughness, a certain strength needed to adapt to another culture. It's not easy. I'm going to talk more about that in a minute. But it's not easy adapting to another culture. And these skills are all skills that you can focus on by focusing on study abroad, by focusing on doing research abroad. I'm not talking about traveling for a week to see the Grand Canyon. That's different. I'm talking about living in another culture, in another language. In that regard, you really do need to live in another language and in another culture. For Taiwan, China doesn't count, right? Because in China, the roots of the culture are similar. I don't want to get into the political argument about Taiwan being distinctive or not. There are shared cultural roots between China and Taiwan. And in fact, many people say that the best of old China is in Taiwan. Certainly the best of the old artifacts are in the National Palace Museum, right? So just in that regard, the best of China is in Taiwan. But if you look at religion and the way religion is done here in Taiwan, It's very, very much closer to traditional religion on the mainland than the mainland has now, because that was all wiped out with the Chinese Cultural Revolution. Okay, so I want to argue that when you go to another culture and live in another culture, you develop these skills. Okay? And again, the other culture and the other language are important. Now, I, of course, will argue that you should go to America. Of course, why not, right? Come to America, study English, learn American culture. But actually, what I will argue is it doesn't matter where you go. Go to Indonesia, right? Go to Nepal, go to Germany, France, Spain, Brazil. But go to another culture in another language. And these skills are skills that get developed when you do that. Okay, how do you build skills? You all know this. You all know you build skills, first of all, in the classroom. That's what you're trying to do with your students. That's what students are trying to do when they go to a class. They're trying to learn certain skills. They're trying to learn certain knowledge related to those skills. You know that as academics, you do that when you build a curriculum. When you put a curriculum together, you put together groups of knowledge and skills. That's what courses are. Courses are sets of skills, sets of knowledge that you put together and you build into something that culminates, that goes deeper. You can gain these skills by experience. We all have that in our daily lives, right? You gain experience negotiating by buying a car. Those are negotiating skills. And finally, you gain it by interaction, by traveling, by living in another culture and another language. That's the point that I have just made. You gain one set of skills by that interaction, and that interaction is in another culture and another language. Now, in just a minute, we'll get to how long you need to go for, but I think it's important that people go for at least 6 months. At least 6 months. Okay? Less than 6 months, it's tourism. 6 months begins to develop that perspective. Okay, now we're going to talk about some of the challenges to international education. One challenge to international education, and particularly to this third component, right? This component that has to do with building personal skills through study abroad. One set of challenges are pretty straightforward. Everything from Taiwan is pretty distant unless you count China. Certainly America is quite distant, and Australia and Europe, places you might want to go. Also, there are the challenges of money. It's expensive to do it. It's useful if that can be built into university curriculum. If you can build into a university curriculum the ability to study abroad, bring those credits back, and graduate on time. So, to think about study abroad effectively and international education, and remember, international education is more than study abroad, but study abroad is a big piece of building skills. There are some colleges in America, colleges, not universities, 4-year colleges, who require their students to spend at least 1 year abroad. There are 10 or 15 of them. Okay? They have found a way to make that economically feasible. It's difficult to do. Places like Harvard, Ohio State, they can't do it. Right? It's not possible. But there are some places that can do that. I would encourage you to think about places in your curriculum where you could build in a year's or 6 months study abroad. For instance, teachers' education. Most of your teachers have to do teacher training. They have to do an internship. They have to train in their schools. Why not require some of them to do that overseas? Teach in a foreign school. You learn two things. You learn teaching and you learn cross-cultural education. Okay. The thing I really want to talk about, though, is culture shock, because that's another major challenge with studying abroad, with international education. Culture shock is the accumulation of cultural conflicts. It happens to everyone, every time they go overseas. Every time you go overseas to spend time, and everyone who goes overseas experiences culture shock if they go long enough. I think I told you that I grew up in Ohio, on farm town, right? Our town had some really big buildings in it. There was one that was 2 stories, right? And there was one building that was 3 stories. We had a 3-story building in my town, 3 floors. Wow, big building, right? First time I went to New York City, I was 19 years old. And I had friends that took me to New York City. And I got out of the subway, because I hadn't seen the city, and I got out of the subway and I went, oh my God. And people had to hold my arms to keep me from falling. It was a culture shock. It's moving from a rural culture to an urban culture. It's very hard to do. It takes time to adjust. Things are different. People don't look at each other in the eye. In New York City, you don't look at someone else, because if you do, they might ask you for money. We got out of the subway, walked around, got back into the subway, and there was a man lying there, drunk. Right? And I went over to try to help him. Because if it had been in my little town, that would be somebody, if I didn't know him, my parents knew him. Something, you know, you helped him. My friend said, oh no, don't do that. There are people to help him. They'll be here, we'll give him a call, but don't mess with him. You'll just get yourself in trouble. He'll call the police, there'll be a lawsuit, something. Don't help him. That's culture shock, okay? Okay. There's a sine curve of culture shock. This comes from legitimate research. But before we do that, I need a volunteer. Could you volunteer for me? Could you come here? Okay. Turn around, okay? I want you to walk that way slowly. Okay, ready? Okay. Go. Okay, now walk that way again. Okay? Does that ever happen to you? Oh, in Taiwan, don't leave it, I need you. Don't leave it. In Taiwan, in America, this is social distance. This is safe. We're talking to each other, everything's okay. I'm too close. This is not safe social distance. This is Taiwanese social distance, right? When I walk down the street like this, right? Now you don't have to do it yet. When I walk down the street like this, little old ladies walk in front of me. Bicycles, motor scooters, taxi cabs. I mean, I'm always doing this, right? Okay? So when I get up in the morning and I go to work, I drive in Taipei. I know it's very courageous. I drive in Taipei, and it's annoying because he's cutting me off. I feel like he's cutting me off, right? And a little old lady, when I'm walking from the parking garage to my office, walks in front of me, or somebody walks straight across in front of me when I'm walking this way. They don't give me my distance, right? And by the end of the day, that's happened 1, 2, 3, 4, 10, 15, 20. It's happened again and again and again, right? Right? Happens all the time. It's just because the social distance is different. They don't think anything about it. These people doesn't bother them. This is just how you walk. This is just how everybody's aware of it. It's okay. Traffic moves fine, working fine. Come here now. Okay. Now I'm going to walk this way, okay. And I want you to cut me off. Sure. Okay? Okay. I want to reach out and do that. I want to hit whoever cuts me off. Not in the morning. It's okay. Thank you. Not in the morning when I go to work, but by the end of the day when I come home and I've had a bad day and my wife's yelled at me, right? And things aren't going real well. A little old lady wants to cut me off, and I want to reach out and go, that's my space. That's culture shock. It's the accumulation of cultural conflicts. See, it doesn't bother me in the morning. It bothers me at night. After it's happened 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 10, 20, 15 times, right? That's culture shock. Now think about that in terms of everything that happens. I love good American hamburgers. I said good American hamburgers, right? I don't like McDonald's. But sometimes I go to McDonald's just for the comfort. Oh, it's a hamburger. Oh, I'm at home. It smells right. It smells like home. It's not a great hamburger. It's not great food, but it's okay. But I don't go there because the food's great. I go there because, oh, it feels like home. Okay? It happens with food. You can't find the food you want. It happens with social distance. It happens with arguments. Taiwanese, I like to say, honey, what do you want to do this weekend? My wife says, well, I'm thinking of going over to my parents on Saturday night for dinner. I say, great, let's do that. Let's go over to your parents on Saturday night for dinner. Saturday comes and what are we doing, honey? Well, we're thinking about, we haven't arranged it yet. Right? It's still not decided yet. Maybe her sister can come, maybe she can't come, maybe the mother's busy, maybe she's not busy. Why don't you just decide? Why don't you just say, it's Tuesday, Saturday we're going for dinner, done. No. Everything has to be right. All the different people, all the different relationships, they all have to work out, and then we're going to have dinner. That's not an American way of doing it. An American way of doing it says, dinner Saturday night, who says yes? Okay, dinner Saturday night. We got dinner Saturday night, it's done. I know it's only Tuesday, but it's done. You're on. Okay? That's culture shock. Okay? And that happens every time I talk to my wife. We think about the world differently. And that culture shock is something that happens when you live in another country for a period. Now, how long is that period? Again, this is the research. There are essentially 4 phases of culture shock. 4 phases. The first phase I call the tourist phase. These are emotions, and this is time, right? So, emotions and time. In the first phase, your emotions are going up. Things are going better. It's a new country. Oh, it's interesting. Wow, look at those temples. Oh, these noodles are great. I didn't know you could have this. I didn't know Chinese food was this good. I thought it was that stuff we get in America. This is really good food. I like this. The people are so friendly, and they are. Taiwanese are so friendly. This is a great place. I love Taiwan. Wow, isn't it a great place? I like being here. Yeah, wow. Right? That's the tourist phase of culture shock, okay? And that lasts for a month, a week, 2 months, maybe 3 months. No, usually it's only about 3, 4, 5, 6 weeks. And then at some point you find yourself saying, and this is the exact phrase that Americans use, why don't they do it like we do it in America? Garbage. I find myself walking down the street with an empty bottle of water and no place to put it. There's no garbage can. In America, we have garbage cans. There's garbage cans on the street corners. Of course, it's not a great idea because the garbage cans overflow and there's garbage all around. I understand. I've lived here long enough now that I like the Taiwanese way of doing it. But when I first got here, I was saying, why don't they do it like we do it in America? Why don't they put out garbage cans? So where do people put their garbage? In their pockets? I guess so. I don't know. Where does the garbage go? Right? What if the garbage is kind of sticky, yucky stuff? What do I do with it? Put it in my pocket? Put it in my briefcase? I don't know. Why don't they do it like we do it in America? Right? And that's what you find yourself saying right here. Why don't they do it like we do it in America? Maybe you would find it about Chinese food. For me, it was, why can't I get a good hamburger? Why can't there be some place in Taiwan I can get a good hamburger? I guess I'll have to make my own. So the second phase here is called the rejection phase. The rejection phase. At least I call it the rejection phase. And in the rejection phase, people basically say, I want to go home. I've had enough. This is too hard. It's too difficult. Maybe you find yourself crying. Maybe you find yourself locked up in your room, reading a book all the time. Just reading a book because I can escape into a book. Maybe you watch TV or movies all the time. Somehow you try to escape from the local culture because it's just too much. That's the second phase. The third phase, down here, is the adaptation phase. And in that phase, you say, you know, I can't get a good hamburger, but I found a really good noodle shop. And what? I really like their noodles, and they've gotten to know me a little bit. And when I come in, they say hi, and they're friendly, and it's a night, and I feel kind of at home there. It's comfortable. Yeah, I go to that noodle shop 2-3 times a week now. Why? Because I've started to adapt to the local culture. I've made sure that I can now begin to understand and appreciate the local culture. Okay? That's the adaptation phase. That means now I'm starting to feel comfortable. I'm starting to understand the language, perhaps, the culture, the differences, the good things, the bad things. Garbage. Taiwan has a unique garbage system. You know, the little trucks go by, they play Beethoven. Da 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 dum, da da dum. Why is it Beethoven? It's Western music. Why does the garbage truck play Western music? Did you ever think about that? The garbage truck, Western music? I don't know if there's something subtly psychological going on there. I don't know. The recycling truck, by the way, plays Chinese music. Right? The recycling truck plays Chinese music, so the garbage truck plays Western music. I don't think anybody actually ever thought of that. I don't think that was intentional, but I think it's just interesting. The garbage in Taiwan is a system in which lots gets recycled. There's no garbage on the streets. Now, part of that is because people come and clean the streets. But there's no garbage on the streets. You go to a big American city and there's garbage on the street. It's embarrassing. It's embarrassing to go to New York City and then come to Taipei. If Taipei can do it, why can't New York do it? That's adaptation. I am now very happy to take my water bottle and put it in my briefcase or put it on the floor of my car until I get home and I empty the car out and put the water bottle in the recycling. But when I first got here, no. And then, of course, there's the final phase. The final phase is the local expert phase. And the local expert phase says, I think I understand. At least I understand as much as a Waiguran can understand, as much as a foreigner can understand. I understand something about this culture. And you know you're in the local expert phase when friends come and visit. Your mother comes, your brother comes, someone comes to visit, and they say, where do I throw my garbage? This is awful. There's no garbage can. And you say, oh, Mom, you just don't understand. You're the local expert, exactly. You're the local expert. So that's culture shock. And if you think about it for a minute, and you think about these skills, you can see that learning to adapt to another culture teaches lots of these skills. It teaches lots of these skills. That study abroad, that part of international education, is a crucial piece. Of course, you want to learn a different language, you want to go with a different attitude, and you want institutional support. So if you study abroad, if you go overseas, it's much better to go in an institutional structure so that there are institutions that will help support you. That's why Fulbright Taiwan works. We support people who come here for a year or go to America for a year to study. It's important to go with an attitude to assume that to not assume that you know everything. rather to assume that there's a lot that you need to learn. So, what are the priorities for study abroad? First priority is just go. If you have to go and it can only be for 2 weeks, go. If you have to go and, if you can go and can only be for pleasure, go. But actually the optimal part is to go for a year, to go study in your discipline, to go to another culture, and to go to another language. So when you're thinking about international education and building skills, you should be encouraging your sons and daughters and students and yourselves, your colleagues, to spend a year in another culture. Both of my daughters spent a year overseas between high school and college. They spent another year overseas in college. Neither of them lives overseas now, but they are different people because of that. One of them actually spent 2 years in Germany and married a German who she met in America, if that makes any sense. Okay. They changed. Their lives were different because they studied overseas. Okay. Let's talk about how big or how important is international education. I'm not going to read this. This is activities that the New Zealand government says should be done for international education. They are trying to promote international education, both at home and abroad. This is America. These are the numbers of foreign scholars who come to America. You can see that the worldwide total in 2010 of foreign scholars was about 115,000. These were the biggest countries: China, India, Korea, Germany, Japan. Taiwan was 12th in terms of scholars to America. Okay? But 115,000, that's a lot of scholars traveling. These are foreign students to America. The numbers of foreign students since 1950 to 2010 has continued to go up. Enrolled students versus other students. So the red line here is enrolled students. And the total number of foreign students in 2010 was almost 700,000 foreign students in America. Now, think about that for a minute. That's a huge economic impact. So it's not only important intellectually, in terms of learning skills, but it just has a very big practical impact. This is the difference between graduate and undergraduate students. And you can see that in America, it's mostly recently graduate students. So, the trends in terms of the increase of international students in America, it's worth $20 billion US a year. $20 billion US a year. Every international student brings about 29,000 US dollars. That's about 2 million won. 2 million won in terms of the impact of international education in America. Okay? These are the international students. I only point this out so you can see that in 2010, there were about 20 million students in America. So 700,000 of the 20 million, right, are international students. It's a huge portion of students in America. These are the fields they come in. Here is Taiwan. About 25% of the Taiwanese come in business and management. This was 2011, and Taiwan was the 5th largest supplier of foreign students to America, about 25,000 foreign students. Back in 1990, Taiwan was the largest supplier of students to America. What has happened is that the Taiwan number has gone down just a little bit, from about 35 to about 25,000, but students from the rest of the world have gone up dramatically, particularly if you look at China, 127,000. And here is Taiwan in terms of undergraduate, graduate, and non-degree students. So the purpose of, and this is Taiwan in terms of the numbers that are undergraduate and graduate. So mostly graduate students from Taiwan to America. Again, the purpose of those slides is to show that international education is not only important intellectually, important for careers, important for skill building, But international education is big business. It can be big business in Taiwan, too, when you're thinking about, for instance, Chinese students to Taiwan. It will be big business. Okay. This is where the funding comes from. Most funding from international students comes from their person and their family. A lot of it comes from colleges and universities. One thing we do at Fulbright Taiwan is we advise people on study abroad. And this is a very important piece of advice you can give to your students. They can give to their friends. American colleges and universities discount their education. It's done individually. There is no national policy. Some colleges do not discount for international students. International students pay the full amount. Some colleges discount international students at the same amount that they discount local students. Private colleges, for instance, some private colleges. So a college I was associate academic vice president at in Pennsylvania, their tuition is about $45,000 US a year. Right? But on average, students only pay about $25,000 on average. Right? They think if they can get $25,000 to $30,000 from an international student, they're ahead. So you can go to that college if you negotiate, not for $40,000, $45,000, but for $25,000 or $30,000. But of course, you have to negotiate. So you shouldn't pay attention to the cost of American higher education in terms of what the sticker price is, what the price is that's on the catalog. You should apply and negotiate. Okay. These are U.S. students overseas. This is the destination of U.S. students overseas. I only put this up to show that among U.S. students overseas, Taiwan is not in the top 20. The number of Taiwan students to the U.S., the number of U.S. students to Taiwan. Note the number of U.S. students to Taiwan is very small. So in summary, Taiwan student numbers to America are static or slightly declining. U.S. student numbers to Taiwan, especially in language programs, are static or slightly climbing. U.S. student numbers are proportionately lower for Taiwan than other Asian destinations. That's crazy. This is such a friendly place. The education system here is so good. There is so much English spoken, particularly at the university level. Taiwan should be attracting large numbers of American university students. I have to say I think it's institutional. I think it's policies. I think it's university policies, and I think it's Ministry of Education policies. And I think people are trying to do something about it, but I still think it's policies that prevent that. Okay? Let me talk to you now about my organization, about Fulbright Taiwan. That was all international education. Oh, heavy stuff. Sorry. This is stuff I like, right? Fulbright Taiwan. This is Senator J. William Fulbright. This is Senator Fulbright with President Harry Truman. This is Senator Fulbright with President John F. Kennedy. In 1946, Congress passed the Fulbright Act. Okay? This was really, really good stuff. Really good stuff. At the end of World War II, America had things all over the world, right? America fought World War II, right, against Germany and Japan, Italy. And America had ships and planes and tanks and guns, but America also had food and clothing and housing and tents and blankets, cars, trucks, all over the world. Right? They just kept producing this stuff, and the war ended, and the war was over, and you didn't need this stuff anymore. What do you do with it? Fulbright said, well, we could bring it home. And American business said, oh, no, don't bring it home. You'll destroy the American economy. All this free stuff coming home, don't bring it home. We could give it to the countries overseas. Now, don't do that. You'll destroy the local economy. What are we going to do with it? Well, we could sell it. Okay, let's sell it. Let's sell it for American dollars. Well, wait a minute, nobody's got American dollars. It's the end of World War II. Every place else is depressed. There's no money over it. Okay. We'll sell it for local currency. So we'll sell it in China for renminbi. What do you do with renminbi? Now, you use some of it to support the embassy, right? You pay local staff at the embassy, and maybe you buy food for people locally, but you got lots of dollars here, lots of renminbi. Why don't we use it to maybe make a better world? Why don't we use it to send scholars to America and American scholars overseas? Wow. You know, there's an old phrase, comes from Latin. It's about a man called Cincinnatus. The phrase was to beat swords, right, into plowshares. Plowshares are the steel you use to turn over the earth to plant crops. To beat swords into plowshares. In other words, to turn weapons of war into weapons of peace. And that's what Fulbright did. He turned these weapons of war into weapons of peace. What a brilliant idea. What a amazing concept. Of course, he was an amazing man. Fulbright was a Rhodes Scholar. He had been governor of Arkansas. He'd been a congressman from Arkansas. And in World War II, he became a senator. So this was Fulbright's vision, and this is our shortened version of the vision. Fulbright's vision was a world with a little more knowledge and a little less conflict. He thought by exchanging people, you would lower conflict and you would increase knowledge. And that was the drive behind the Fulbright program. For Fulbright Taiwan, this is our mission, to build knowledge, to exchange cultures, to establish long-term relationships among peoples and institutions, to change lives, and to symbolize Taiwanese-American friendship. Let me mention that for a minute. In 1979, America de-recognized Taiwan, recognized the People's Republic of China. And in 1979, that meant that Fulbright, the Fulbright program, then it was called the U.S. Foundation for Scholarly Exchange. Fulbright could no longer technically exist because Fulbright was a legal entity, a legal thing between the Taiwan government and the American government. But if America says there's no Taiwan government, then how can you have a legal entity? You can't have it. So in 1979, Taiwan and America shook hands. And they said, well, this is a good thing. Let's keep doing this. And they kept doing Fulbright. So from '79 until 2010, Fulbright was not based upon a legal institution. What were the implications of that? It's kind of interesting. It meant that all the people that worked for Fulbright, from my organization, really didn't work for anybody. It was as if I was paying them to fix my house. Hey, yeah, want to fix my house? Come on, I give you a little money, you don't talk. My staff was not eligible for labor insurance. They were not eligible for National Pension Fund. They were not eligible for National Health Insurance. My staff actually technically didn't work for anybody. So we had to fund all that ourselves. We had to fund our own retirement plan. Okay? But in 2010, America and Taiwan didn't shake hands. We signed an agreement. And that agreement made Fulbright legal. The important thing to know is that in that whole period of time, Fulbright remained the only place where American money and Taiwanese money cohabitated, lived together, slept in the same room. Now, Fulbright money came from Taiwan and America, and it was joint money supporting a joint program, and it was the only place that happened. It's an important symbol of Taiwanese-American relations. Oops. So, the Fulbright program started in '46. Actually, in 1947, the very first Fulbright program in the world was in China. the Republic of China in Nanjing signed the first Fulbright agreement. And then, of course, because of the Civil War, it stopped. And it started back up again in 1957 in Taiwan. There are 155 Fulbright programs around the world. Fulbright programs are all bilateral. America, Taiwan, America, Japan, America, Germany, America, France, America, Australia, America, South Africa. 155. Only 50 of them are run by commissions, by foundations. I do not work for AIT. I'm not an employee of the American government. I'm not an employee of the Taiwan government. I don't work for Waijiaobu. I don't work for the Ministry of Education. I work for an independent nonprofit who is a nonprofit foundation. I'm the only American employee. Everybody else is Taiwanese. And in fact, I'm the first American director. The previous American director was Dr. Wu Jinji. Some of you may know Dr. Wu. It's binational. It's jointly funded by the US and Taiwan. There are two sets of programs. One set are traditional programs, scholars and students. And scholars and students, about 60% of the funding comes from Taiwan and 40% comes from America. The other program is language teaching, and there it's about 80% from Taiwan and 20% from America. These are alumni of Fulbright. Zhang Yihui, the current prime minister, got his PhD in political science at Yale on a Fulbright. There are 4 members of cabinet who are Fulbright grantees. I put this up so you can also see that we don't give just to blue, we also give to green. So it's not a blue-green issue, it's a issue of objectivity and merit. Okay? But the Fulbright alumni in Taiwan are very well-known people. This is the program then, scholars, Taiwanese to the US, Americans to Taiwan, students, and language teachers. In terms of the American side, we bring about 10 scholars here each year. We bring about 10 students. If your institution would like to have a Fulbright scholar, we would be happy to try to help arrange that, but it requires somebody on the American end to apply. They have to say they want to come to your school. And then we can help arrange that, and if their application is competitive, and it's very competitive, they would end up coming and spending a year at your school. That happens for 10 people every year. We also bring about 10 students to Taiwan each year to study. We also bring English teaching assistants to Taiwan. They teach in elementary schools, they teach full-time. They are in Kaohsiung, Yilan, Jimen, Taichung, and Taipei. Notice that they're nicely evenly distributed around the island, and they are in blue and green counties. People ask me why those counties. Because those counties have asked us. They have asked Fulbright Taiwan to bring language teachers to their counties, right? Other counties haven't asked. If other counties ask, and if we have the money, and if, that's a big and, right? And if we have the money, right? We would be happy to do other counties as well. They co-teach. Here's some pictures of them co-teaching. They work in English villages. They work outside the classroom in baking clubs or storytelling or English lunches. They have lots of cultural activities. Every year they do some rice planting or dragon boat festivals. They work with professors because they teach in elementary schools, so we have them work with Taiwanese language professors, education professors, so they can be better teachers. Here are some of the professors. We think that there are huge mutual benefits. And then we also send Taiwanese to America, and we encourage you to think about this. We send Taiwanese scholars, senior scholars. Experience America is a particularly interesting category for many of you because of the way you raised your hands. Experience America says, I have my PhD, but I've never been to America. Okay? I'd like to go to America and do research. We have a particular category to help people who have never been to America to go and do research in America. Okay? So we encourage cross-cultural education because we want people who've never been there to have that experience. We also have a Scholars in Residence program. If you have colleagues or friends at particular kinds of schools in America, we can support you to go teach in those schools. And I can talk more about that later. It's a little complicated. We also send students to America, so encourage your students to think about PhDs in America. Last year we had people accepted at Harvard, at Berkeley, at Michigan, at Wisconsin. We have people accepted at some of the Southern California, University of Southern California. We have people accepted at some of America's best universities. So consider that. And then, of course, we send Taiwanese to teach Chinese in America, just like we bring Americans here to teach English. Okay? If you're in education programs, there are some requirements for this. People have to be about 30 or less. They have to have an English teaching background here in Taiwan. In other words, we want to send people to America who are not trained as Chinese teachers. They act as assistants in America. We want to send people who are English teachers in Taiwan so that when they come back, they're better English teachers. Because they also get to take courses on English teaching in America. Okay? Those are fully supported programs. The final thing we do is we give advice about studying in America. So we have free advice. I have an advisor. Is Clarence here? Clarence has stepped out of the room. Clarence was with me earlier. Clarence does Education USA advising. He's heard this speech before, I think, so I think he's not interested in hearing it again. Clarence does Education USA advising. He'll come to your campuses, he'll come to your schools, talk with people individually or do sessions with larger groups of people about how to study in America. So, these are some quotes from the Institute of International Education in America. The purpose of these quotes is I'm not going to read them to you. You can read them later. You've got the handouts. But the purpose of the quotes is basically to say that the next generation, the next century, is going to require people to be globally focused. You know, you can no longer be effective in your careers if you don't have a global piece to your education. And that's what these quotes say. This is a New Zealand educational agency saying the same thing. It means in business that in terms of these activities, some are going to be local and some are going to be global. Production and assembly, by definition, has to be local. You have to produce it somewhere, right? You have to put it together somewhere. Okay. Service. Service is usually local. Service is, how do I get my watch fixed? Service is, I need to talk to somebody about managing my money. However, some service is now global. In America, you call up the helpline for a bank. Maybe you get somebody in India. I think that happens in Taiwan, too. You call up the helpline for a bank, and maybe you get somebody God knows where. Okay? Those are local, but these things, supply chains, personal recruitment, markets, financing, those are increasingly global. People get their financing from all over the world. They don't have to go to the local bank to get money to build their factory. Of course, you have a huge advantage here in Taiwan. You have not only Mandarin, but you have traditional characters. I haven't learned simplified Chinese, but I understand that once you learn traditional, it's relatively easy to do simplified. But if you learn simplified, it's not easy to do traditional. So that's a market segment, a market niche that Taiwan has a huge advantage in. Of course, your location. It's a wonderful location. East Asia, and in addition, democracy, rule of law, transparency. Taiwan has wonderful advantages in terms of those characteristics. This is a map of East Asia where countries' size is based upon their GDP, okay? And I think the interesting thing here is that China and Taiwan is about 1/12 the size of China if you look at GDP. If you look at population, it's 1/60th. But GDP, it's 1/12. China is a big player. China is half the size of Korea. It's bigger than all of these guys, Singapore, Philippines, in Cambodia, Thailand, much bigger than all of those. Taiwan is a big player. And then this is my favorite. These are the maps of Europe. This is Europe. It's kind of a strange looking Europe, but this is Europe. These countries are sized by the size of their populations. So, Germany, France, Britain, Spain, Italy, Poland, and then if Taiwan were in Europe, Taiwan. If Taiwan were in Europe. If Taiwan were in Europe, it would be, in the European Union, it would be the 7th largest of 28 countries, 7 out of 28, and it would be bailing out Portugal, Italy, Spain, Greece, right? Taiwan's foreign currency reserves are the 4th largest in the world. China, Japan, Korea, Taiwan. Okay. So, my recommendations. International education is something that's not just study abroad. It should be across the curriculum. It should engage international extracurricular activities, activities in the community, travel, obviously living abroad and learning a language. I encourage you strongly to incorporate, to put international education as a key component in your personal education and in the education for your students for the next century. 谢谢。